Hello, Internet, and welcome to episode 9 of the Braindrizzle podcast. This week we have a guest, Andrew Maynard from the Risk Bites channel. Hello, Andrew.
Hi, good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's good to talk to you too. Do you prefer Andrew or Maynard or...
Oh, Andrew will do.
Excellent. So for our audience who may not have heard of your channel, why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Sure, so Risk Bites is a channel where I talk in very short, slightly quirky videos about the science of risk and human health risk, the sorts of things that could harm your health if you're not careful.
I see. And you also run a blog called 2020 Science, right?
I do, though, to be honest, and since I've been making the videos, I have posted very infrequently on the blog. My time has been sucked up way too much by YouTube.
I see. Now, risk science, is that what you do outside of YouTube?
So I'm actually a professor at the University of Michigan, and amongst other things, I teach about risk and the science of risk. I do a lot with emerging technologies and how you try and preempt the risk so you don't make a huge mess of things.
I see.
What's the coursework like for that kind of a thing? I'm curious.
The big course I teach is Quantitative Risk Assessment, which is all about how you actually place a number on the chances of something causing you harm. So you're sipping a cup of coffee, it's got 101 chemicals in. What's the probability of one of those chemicals giving you cancer or giving you some other sort of health impact if you drink it too much over too long a period? And so the course is all about how you actually go about calculating that.
What actually inspired you to start the channel?
Oh, that was my kids. Got a couple of teenage kids who, my daughter in particular, got heavily into YouTube and a couple of years ago now, and she was part of a collab channel that went on for 2 years. They've actually just given their last series of YouTube videos. Just watching the success of that channel and what she was doing intrigued me about where YouTube was going. The thing that really got me actually was the transition that you've seen over the last probably 2 years with YouTube, going from people watching videos of fluffy kittens and the pratfall type stuff to YouTube being a really serious channel for strong education, deep education. What has really intrigued me is there's a huge hunger out there for people that want good content, solid content.
I definitely agree. I mean, there are still a lot of cat videos, to be fair.
Kitties! I love kitties. We have a cat video, even.
You do?
I remember one of the few times I actually was successfully able to post on camera, and Betty started attacking my feet, so I picked them up.
That's true. Cats do help. My advice is, if you can, draw cats in your chalkboard.
You're the second person today that's told me to put some cat videos up.
Maybe the risk of cats.
Yeah.
Well, there is that whole toxoplasmosis thing, so...
You know, I was going to say exactly the same. Maybe we ought to have a Risk Bites on toxoplasmosis and mind control.
That would be an interesting episode.
Shut up, guys.
We're fairly certain Jack already has it.
Probably.
I really like your channel because it's very different than a lot of other content, and I don't mean to say this in a bad way, but it's kind of a buzzkill, because it's like, this is an awesome technology, but it can kill you. Maybe.
Right, yeah. Although, hopefully, there's the bright side of it as well, because if you know what can kill you, you can engineer that out, and you can engineer things way more safely.
Exactly.
Will we ever have totally safe cigarettes one day? Like in Transmetropolitan?
Yeah, well, you know, actually, so I was going to say, no, of course not, but one of my students has just written a blog post about e-cigarettes, and it's actually really interesting where that technology is going, especially if you take out the nicotine and put other stuff in them.
Ooh.
Yeah, that could work.
Yeah.
Jack and I, we read a lot of science news for our content. We just have a personal vendetta against carbon nanotubes and graphene, so it was refreshing to see a video that was bashing it a little bit.
Oh, great. Well, no, thank you for that. Thank you for that.
We get it. It's the new duct tape, you know. It slices, it dices, it makes julienne fries. Graphene, always something new about graphene.
Oh, so I'll tell you, I was in with carbon nanotubes from the get-go, so I saw all the hype over those, and then when they became less, yesterday's news because graphene was it. I'm not quite sure what comes after graphene.
Yeah, maybe like double-sided graphene or something, I don't know.
But no, don't joke, I'm sure it's there.
So, how did you get into risk assessment? Like, what is your sort of broader background?
I started off as a physicist, and I guess I still am a physicist, but that got me into the occupational health field, so measuring the airborne dust that people are exposed to. But that got me into the whole field of nanotechnology. And for many years, probably 10, 11 years now, I was deeply involved with the whole US government investment in nanotechnology, but also leading the investment in research that tried to understand how these new materials could be harmful and how we can preempt that so we can not make a mess of things. That got me into it. I was working as a researcher for the US government for a long period of time in that area, and then moved out of that, but got really heavily involved in science communication and science policy surrounding new and emerging technologies.
Now, I imagine many of our audience are very interested in nanotech. So, in general, do you need a physics background, or can you come into nanotech from chemistry, from engineering, or is it mainly you start with physics and then you move into nanotech?
You know, it helps if you have a little bit of a mashup of everything, but you can understand some of the basics very easily from different backgrounds. So I tell people that nanotech is nothing more than a mixture of engineering and design, but at a really small scale. All you're doing is you're making stuff, but you're making it out of small clumps of atoms rather than big lumps of stuff. And if you can get that idea in your head, you can actually do an awful lot, even if you don't have that pure physics background.
Myself personally, I plan on going into biotech, and I love the communication side of science. But for me personally, going into policy sounds like hell. So why did you go into it?
I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and somebody said, "You fancy coming and doing this in Washington, D.C.?" And fool that I am, I said yes. But actually, it's intriguing. And I was in D.C. for 5 years, and that was enough. I needed to get out. I needed to do something real after that. But just seeing how things work, how decisions are made, how people either use evidence or abuse evidence to make those decisions, it was fascinating, it was intriguing, it was frightening.
So, what can you think of any specific example of being frightening that won't get all of us arrested?
Oh, goodness me. Well, actually, no, I can't give you an example of that, but I can give you a very similar example of what I learned about how you actually get the information you want in front of people who are making decisions. I worked a lot with journalists and the media, and I ended up getting a huge respect for journalists, especially science journalists. They get a bad rap sometimes. But understanding that as you develop a relationship with these people who are out to try and tell the truth as they see it, it became very obvious that a lot of the decisions that are made by policymakers in Washington, D.C. are driven by what they read in the newspaper, that what appears above the fold on the Washington front page of the Washington Post. That's frightening in itself, because if the wrong stuff appears there, goodness knows what decisions are going to be made. But what I did realize is that the science community can actually begin to understand how to work with journalists and be good sources, solid sources, so good, solid science stories are told where people are actually going to read them and take notice.
I would certainly hope so, because, yeah, like you said, that is a scary sort of concept on the face of it, but I guess it can be used for good. Now, do you think that is a good system as long as the right journalists report on the right stuff, or would you prefer that scientists or science policy experts have a more direct involvement, or do you think that the sort of reading about it and then making the decision is the best option we have?
I think it's an inevitable system. It's not a great system if you look at the translation of knowledge from the people that are generating it to the people that are using it. But the reality is that the people who need information in order to make decisions, there are only so many ways that they can get that in packages that they can understand. And journalists are trained to do exactly this: take really complex stuff and translate it into something that somebody else can actually understand and use. Now, of course, that's open to a huge amount of misuse and abuse, and we've seen a lot of that. But there are still many journalists out there who do a fantastic job at translating that information, not serving the scientists and not serving the decision makers, but being that independent arbiter of information.
I mean, from what you're saying, it sounds like the people that are making these sort of science-related decisions should also probably watch more YouTube.
Actually, I was going to say I'm not quite sure when that'll happen, but then if you look at the average age of the staffers up on Capitol Hill, maybe they're all plugged into YouTube anyway, so we just need to make sure the right videos get in front of them.
Yeah. Can you give us a little sneak peek about what you're planning on your channel, or is it like sort of taking on different subjects one at a time?
Going to be kicking on different subjects. I've got a whole long list of things I'd like to cover. So things that are pulled out of the lectures that I give, the courses that I teach. But to be honest, I tend to go almost on a whim each week. It depends how tired I am, what else is happening, what catches my fancy. So if you look out, I've got a general plan. I want to do a little bit more on quantitative risk assessment. So answer questions like, what the heck does dose response mean? When you see a newspaper article that talks about the linear assumption in cancer, what on earth are they talking about? That sort of stuff. And I've also got a series planned on risk perception. The way that people perceive and think about risk is utterly different from how scientists think about it and quantify it. So I've got these big ideas, but week to week, it really depends on what's happening as to what goes up.
And I do think that's important because, again, if people are reading not the best science news, it's either, oh my god, this new thing is amazing, or oh my god, this new thing is going to kill everyone you know. So it's important for people to sort of understand that, no, there are ways that you can actually quantify this and understanding how scientists look at it.
That's my subversive aim, that I've got these videos up that are hopefully fun to watch, a little bit quirky, but there's a really serious message going through them. And if you watch enough of them, you'll be able to sort of build up this understanding of how to think differently about risk from all the different bits and pieces.
Oh, yeah, it certainly made me sort of think about how you think about what is risky and what is not. And another thing I wanted to ask you about, I follow you on Twitter, and occasionally you link a blog called Mind the Science Gap. What's that about?
Actually, from a science communication class that I run. So each semester here, I'll take 10 students and I'll give them the task of writing about science once a week for 10 weeks on this blog called Mind the Science Gap. The trick here is that their pieces are not pre-screened. I don't read them. I don't know what they're going to write about. They are solely responsible for their content. So they write it. When they press publish, the world can see it. And that puts an incredible pressure and sense of fear in them, but it's good fear because it gets them to think really hard about what they're trying to communicate, how they're trying to communicate. So with the Mind the Science Gap course, you can see over the course of the 10 weeks, these students really sharpen up their communication skills because they get a very clear idea of how important it is to get it right and how to connect, and very important to connect with their audience. The interesting thing about the course is it's not a course about learning how to write science blogs. It's a course about how to communicate effectively with anybody, whether it's your co-workers, whether it's your collaborators, whether it's your boss, whether it's a journalist or anybody else, because the essence is the same. You've got to take a complex idea and you've got to package it into something which is easy enough to understand and effective enough to convey the essence of that message.
Have you considered putting that course online? Because it sounds like a course that every science student should take ever.
Yeah, I was just about to suggest that. What's the chance of this course being at every college as a required?
I don't think it would happen, and I'll tell you why. Apart from the fact that you've got to have somebody that's really got the time and dedication to run the students through, and you can only do a few students at the same time. It is a high-risk course, and the high-risk aspect of it is that nobody knows what these students are going to put up until they put it up, which means that there's always a chance they're going to put something up really dumb. And I live in dread of the day that happens. I trust my students enough to be pretty sure they're not going to do this, but most institutions will run a mile before they allow this to happen.
But here's the thing. If they post something really dumb, the internet's kind of a self-correcting system. Everyone will dogpile on them if they get something wrong. I mean, I'm sure if you've ever made any minute mistake in a video, we've done it a few times, people will point it out.
Okay, last thing we need, though, is for some poor grad student who's under a lot of pressure already to swallow a bunch of sleeping pills because everybody dogpiled on them because they made a mistake on a blog that they wrote while they were coming down off of black market Adderall because they've been awake for 2 days studying. There's no college that wants that to happen. I mean, these things have well, we got a risk assessment guy right here. Tell us about the risk of this.
Those are precisely the two sides of it which keep me awake. It's the excitement to think that the internet is self-correcting. They put something out which is wrong. Somebody points it out. They can go back and self-correct. On the other hand, the last thing I want is a student just so stressed out they can't cope. The way that I deal with that, and that is a very serious concern. The way that I deal with it is, first of all, making sure that these students are fully briefed so that they're aware of the pitfalls. I have enough trust in them, knowing them that they're going to do their best to do a good job, but I monitor what goes out incredibly carefully. And if there's any indication that there's going to be a backlash against something, I work really closely with that student to make sure that they don't get the flag for that. I've never done this yet, but if necessary, I would actually take a post down if it looked like it was really going to harm the student.
Well, I mean, I'm just spitballing ideas because I think this is a really important concept to get across to science students. I wonder if you could have, like, a sort of volunteer board of people who had been through the course. Like, a few volunteers at a time will screen the outgoing entries, and then they'll get posted publicly.
I'd actually thought about that, and I backed away from the idea because the core of the learning experience is knowing that you're responsible. As soon as you put any sort of screening in, you relax a little bit because you think somebody else is going to mistake. Whereas the reality is, once you leave the confines of your course or whatever, if you're going to be an effective communicator, you've got to be willing to take that risk, and you've got to be comfortable with that risk. And most of the time, it actually isn't a risk. It's not that often, if you're smart with your writing, that you make a mistake that's so stupid that it's going to get you in a real big trouble.
I don't mean like screening heavily, but like what you said that you watch out for what they're putting out.
Yes. So, in fact, on that, I've actually tried to recruit a number of people to read the blogs and to provide feedback. And what I would love is more people that would just keep an eye on them and provide that constructive feedback. And if there is anything there that needs to be corrected fast, they can actually jump in and help with that process.
Well, I'll volunteer if you need help.
Get yourself volunteered.
Awesome.
Sucker.
That's a cool idea. Once I advance in my science education, I'm just starting, but I hope to take, at least if it's not a course, I hope to self-impose that kind of regimen for a period of time.
Uh-huh.
Although I hope I've gotten pretty good making brainstorm and whatnot, at communicating science.
Well, I've been watching the videos, and you do a pretty good job, actually. And I think there are a lot of people out there that aren't necessarily experts in fields, but they're very good at taking information that they come into contact with and actually conveying it in a very effective way.
Well, thank you. It's been a struggle because, I mean, my main interest and sort of expertise, if it can be called that, is the biotech and the biology and maybe a little bit of medicine. But in general, I have to write about pretty much everything. So it's been interesting.
And of course, this is the skill of a really good science journalist. A good science journalist doesn't know all the science, but they know which questions to ask.
I don't think I'll go into science journalism. It sounds like it'd be kind of a thankless job.
At times, I think.
Is this sort of all that's on your plate, or do you have any other projects on the go, or is it mainly the class and the YouTube?
No, these are the things that I almost do on the side. So with my day job, I run a department here at the University of Michigan, and I run a research center, and those take up more hours than you would care to imagine, or actually in a week. In fact, I'm not quite sure how I fit so many hours in the week. So the respite is actually the stuff that I do at the weekend, almost for relaxation.
So have you assessed the risk of how little sleep you get?
No, I've been too scared to, actually.
And we're certainly not helping with that. Sorry about that.
I actually know somebody who goes to the University of Michigan at Flint. He's a theater major, but he's taking this interesting math class where they teach you different ways to interpret and visualize math word problems, and the entire course is centered around the idea of trying to teach kids new ways of visualizing mathematical problems and basically understanding exactly how quantities relate to the real world, and through that getting young adults to learn how to make their own equations, I guess. I mean, he tells me about the kind of stuff that they do in class. Like, a lot of times they have to get up and actually stand around the room and act out these word problems, or find a way to visually represent something that it would actually be hard to literally do, like fit 1,000 watermelons into a Buick Century.
So really interesting that, and it actually ties in with some of the work that I do. So if you're talking about risk, usually you come up with a number, say there's a 1 in a million chance of something happening, or sort of 9 out of 10 chance that something else will happen. And to a lot of people, those numbers mean absolutely nothing. In fact, even to me, so story here, I remember going for a CAT scan once. And if you go for a CAT scan, they have to pump your veins full of some dye so you sort of show up on the instrument. And just they inject this, they give you the disclaimer where you have to read through, and at the bottom it says that sort of, I don't know, sort of 1 in 10,000 people die of this. And you're sitting there thinking, what does that mean? 1 in 10,000? Does that mean I should sign this or I should not? And I work in this area. I haven't got the foggiest what that means. But because of that, in the field of risk and risk communication, we do a lot of work in trying to make these numbers real, or trying to understand how you convey them or represent them so people can actually make sense of them exactly, by the sounds of it, like happens in this math class.
It sounds really interesting. I'm going to be visiting him here soon, actually, and probably one of the first things I'm going to do is be like, so, you got your math book?
When people hear small risks, like 1 in 10,000, 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million, it's kind of disturbing to think that many of those, like, low-risk events happen so much that the probability of that bad thing happening are still somewhat high.
With that particular injection, I can tell you I was thinking, I can't remember what the number was, say it was 1 in 10,000. What was going through my head was, how many people actually get this procedure? If it's 100,000 people, that's 10 people a year that die. So yeah, even though a risk may sound small, you multiply that up by the number of people that are affected, and that really begins to get quite worrying.
Now, something that I'm very interested in is biotech, and specifically GMOs. Any plans to make a video about that in the future?
Yeah, that'll come in either, or in fact, probably both, looking at genetically modified organisms, but also the new field of synthetic biology, where people are being incredibly smart with how they can engineer the genome of plants and other organisms.
I don't know if you've heard of this. Have you heard of the biohacker community?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely fascinating. So a few years ago, I actually did quite a lot looking at advanced biotechnology, but also the amateur biotechnology community with the biohacking community.
Yeah, they seem to have a lot of their safety protocols pretty well in place.
Very interesting. And if you go back, I guess, sort of 6 or 7 years ago, at the very beginning of the biohacker community development, nobody was quite sure what to do. But you've very rapidly seen these public community laboratories develop, where they've been very focused on good laboratory procedures and safe laboratory procedures. It's a fascinating social movement that you're seeing develop here.
Probably comes from the DIY ethic. Now, the DIY ethic is tied to the punk community, which, as you know, a lot of punks are anarchists. So very, very, very much in these kind of punk movements, you find an emphasis on self-accountability. I've always kind of noticed that there is very much a punk influence in what I've seen of the biohacking community. I believe there was even one talk that this one lady did at this conference or whatever, where she actually starts talking about the punk rock contribution. I mean, I was snotty as I watched it because I was just kind of like, what do you know about punk rock, Grandma? Until I remembered that my mom and aunts and uncles were all punk and they're all pushing 50, so I have no room to talk. But it's kind of interesting how that is a way in which extreme and unconventional political views have actually had a very, very positive effect on the continuation of science and science research, and actually putting it in the hands of citizens the way that it was at the very beginning. But instead of a whole bunch of rich lord and ladies doing natural philosophy for fun in their home laboratories, you have a whole bunch of punks. It's nice.
You're absolutely correct, and I love the fact that you can see a number of these communities develop where people have suddenly got access the tools to do really fascinating things. And they had the knowledge there, but they didn't necessarily have the tools. But now if you look at synthetic biology and the biohacker movement, you can buy the tools you need very effectively over eBay, or you can join these communities and work with stuff, and it's much bigger than that. So you look at the maker community with things like 3D printing, all of a sudden you're having a revolution in what people can do on top of what they could just think about.
Point of advice, do not buy a lot of lab glassware if you don't have a team of people to help you with experiments. That's just a general advice I'm putting out there from experience.
In what aspect? Are you talking about washing the stuff or just looking after the stuff?
No, I bought a lot of glassware because I'm like, oh, this summer I'm going to get into biohacking, and then nothing happened.
Right, yeah.
So he's got a bunch of glassware sitting where most people's unbuilt model train sets sit, or there's a big old bin of Legos where there should be a Lego Corvette.
See, you obviously need to team up with somebody else that's got the rest of the stuff. You bring the glassware to the party, somebody else brings the sequencers and whatever, and you...
I'm not in the biggest of cities, so it's like, hi, anybody here? Nope, okay, cool.
Well, maybe somebody's willing to make the trip?
Yeah, I don't know.
You want to give an internet shout-out if anybody listening?
Yeah, well, I don't want to give away my location. Andrew, thank you so much. Unless you had another interesting story, we don't want to keep you up late too much.
No, that's fine. No, pleasure talking to you both. This has been great.
Yeah, and by the way, we're on iTunes and YouTube, so to find the link to his channel and probably his blog and Twitter and that student blog, because it seems very interesting, go to the YouTube channel and find the links in the description. Again, thank you very much, Andrew.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.